Hey, what's going on, everybody? I want to thank you for tuning in for another edition of Truthbuster News. I'm your host, Truthbuster, and it is June 5th, 2017. And as I stated off in my previous briefs, videos, and uploads, that the insanity doesn't stop. At every level and every facet, it continues to roll along like a tumbleweed blown through the desert. And with the horrific false flag attack that occurred in Britain not even 2 days ago, numerous reports have come out about it on the investigations of what perpetrated the attack and how and why. Well, we all know the answer, and it is the government-created terror group. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, al-Nusra, Mossad, that are funded, backed, and trained by the intelligence agencies and governments along the western part of the world. At the tip of the spear is primarily the one here in the U.S., but everybody knows that. And even though there has been people shedding light on the situation and dropping out information on it, I came across some intelligence articles and briefs that I'm going to do a video on here in the near future. But what I want to cover today is falling back on the series that I created, government-funded terrorism, and this will fall in line as well. But this one shoots to a different avenue of what I had set out to do. And I had found an article on Blacklisted News covering that very topic. And the author of the article was written by Michael Chorzowski. The article is titled, "The U.S. military sent over $1 billion worth of light weapons to multiple armed groups in Iraq." Now, before I jump into the content, just about 2 weeks ago, people had came out, such as Dabu7 and others. I want to give him credit where it's due for putting it out there. And this goes to the others that did the work as well. That $1 billion worth of military equipment had disappeared a short time after Donald Trump made that deal with Saudi Arabia. Is there a possible connection? The future will tell. But at this moment, as the article goes on, management and logistical failure. Quoting a recently declassified U.S. audit, Amnesty International reports that the U.S. Army has failed to keep tabs on more than $1 billion worth of arms and other military equipment sent to Iraq under the Iraq Training and Equipment Fund, the ITEF. In 2015, U.S. Congress appropriated $1.6 billion for the ITEF program. The funds were earmarked to fight against the ISIS in response to Obama's counterterrorism campaign launched in summer 2014, which is a complete bullshit and utter lie that Obama launched. And we all know that. Counterterrorism, when he was directly funding it. If you can recall, during that year, he held press conferences in the White House press room where he said we were training and funding ISIL fighters. Trained and funded by the U.S. military. With that tidbit out there, let's continue on. In the bitter irony, a large number of these weapons landed up in the hands of terrorists, including ISIS. Wonder how that happened. Could it be that the military-industrial complex, along with the CIA and the rest of the alphabet gang, such as the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, and the like, gave them the coordinates where to pick the weapons up, gave the military false intel and false coordinate drops to drop the weaponry so they could be apprehended by ISIS and others? Well, here's the bottom line. Yes. The $1.6 billion were spent on light weaponry. That's all for a good cause. The shipments of weapons and ammunition were, according to the reports of dispatch to Iraq, care of the Iraqi armed forces to be distributed to armed groups involved in fighting ISIS and Daesh. Some of the shipments unfortunately went astray or landed in the wrong hands, according to Patrick Wilkin, an Amnesty researcher on the International Arms Control and Human Rights. This is attributable to U.S. Army's flawed and potentially dangerous system for controlling millions of dollars worth of arms transfers to a hugely volatile region. The report makes for especially sobering reading given the long history of leakage to U.S. arms to multiple armed groups committing atrocities in Iraq, including the armed group calling itself the Islamic State. Amnesty International, May 24, 2017, put out the transfers, which included tens of thousands of assault rifles worth $28 million, hundreds of mortar rounds, and hundreds of Humvee armored vehicles, were destined for use by the Central Iraqi Army, including the predominantly Shia popular mobilization units, as well as the Kurdish Peshmerga forces. While acknowledging the billion-dollar trade in light weaponry, Amnesty does not beg the question why these tens of thousands of weapons sent to Iraq in the first place, what objectives are being served. Amply documented, the U.S. and its allies are supplying weapons and training and military equipment to numerous Al-Qaeda affiliated rebels, including ISIS, acting on behalf of their state sponsors. This reflected on what I said a second ago. According to Amnesty, the ceding of weapons to multiple rebel groups is justified. The killing of civilians is not an issue. The failures of the U.S. Army outlined in the DoD report pertain to errors in monitoring, delivery, record-keeping, and human error. The DoD audit found several serious shortcomings in how IETF equipment was logged and monitored from point of delivery onward, including fragmentary record-keeping and arms depots in Kuwait and Iraq, information logged across multiple spreadsheets, databases, and even on handwritten receipts. Large quantities of equipment manually entered into multiple spreadsheets, increasing the risk of human error. Incomplete records, meaning those responsible for the equipment were unable or unwilling to ascertain its location for status. Amnesty fails to acknowledge that the Pentagon has been selling weapons to jihadist armed groups as a part of carefully designed military agenda with a view to destabilizing Iraq and the rest of the Middle East continent-wide. Amplify documented the ISIS and other terror groups have been receiving weapons from both the U.S. and its allies, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and a significant part of the $1.6 billion has been used to finance weapons and shipments to the ISIS border, both directly as well as indirectly through the third-party associates. Amnesty casually places the blame on the Iraqi armed forces. Lax controls, record-keeping within the Iraqi chain of command has resulted to the weapons falling in the wrong hands, according to AI. Weapons manufactured in the USA and other countries wind up in the hands of armed groups known to be committing war crimes and other atrocities, such as well paramilitary militias are now incorporated into the Iraqi army. What Amnesty fails to mention is that these paramilitary groups, which are committing countless atrocities, are directly or indirectly supported by the U.S. The good news, however, according to Amnesty, is that in response to the audit, the U.S. military has pledged to tighten up a system for tracking and monitoring future transfers to Iraq. According to AI, the U.S. is not in any way complicit in human rights violations by dispatching weapons to multiple armed groups which they finance and control. Remember that. According to AI's Patrick Wilken, it's a result of poor management and lack of checkups and controls. This should be an urgent wake-up call for the U.S. and all other countries supplying arms to Iraq to urgently shore up checks and controls. Sending millions of dollars worth of arms into a black hole and hoping for the best is not a viable counter-terrorism strategy. It is just flat-out insane, said Patrick Wilken. Any state selling arms to Iraq must show that there are strict measures in place to make sure weapons will not be used to violate rights. Without these safeguards, no transfer should take place. Why were these weapons sent to Iraq in the first place? Amnesty International is urging the USA to comply with the Lahey Law, which prohibits the supply of most types of U.S. military aid and training to foreign security, military, and police units credibly alleged to have committed gross human rights violations. What nonsense Amnesty does not address is that the issue of the state sponsorship of terrorism, namely human rights committed on behalf of the state of Iraq, and must also accede to the Global Arms Trade Treaty, which has strict rules in place to stop arms transfers or diversion of arms that could fuel atrocities. So, we have heard this has been going on within the last couple of years. But let's take it further back than that. What about the Gulf War? What about the equipment that's been left in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, Iran? Are you starting to put the dots together? This article does not say a bigger now than enough picture with the writing on the wall right in front of your face that they are supplying them. Every Western-backed government, from the UK on down, from NATO to the US military and others, they're delivering them to them deliberately. And they come up with a bullshit story of poor management and record keeping. Are you out of your mind? How can one not see or recognize that? These sheeple out here have got to be, hey, wake up, dude. They're supplying it. And what is the end result? The attacks we've seen happen time and time and time again. All over the Middle East, the UK, all over Europe. And some even happen here. And they're going to increase. Wake up, prepare, be safe. God bless and survive another day.